At my father's funeral, my mother and sister whispered loud enough for everyone, "She's just the maid's daughter, not real family." 3 days later, I was told to leave the house by sunset. As I stood crying at the gate, the driver handed me a letter that changed everything. My name is Mary Delacroix, and I was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. Our family home stood just off the Battery, a 3-story antebellum house with wraparound porches, wisteria climbing the railings, and an old oak tree in the yard that had probably seen more history than I ever would. Growing up, people believed I had everything: money, elegance, status. What they didn't know was that behind the laced curtains and polite smiles, my life was carefully constructed by secrets. My father, Augustine Delacroix, was a prominent attorney known across the state. He had the kind of commanding presence that made even judges lean in when he spoke. My mother, Colette, was a woman of delicate taste and cruel precision. Everything she touched had to fit a curated aesthetic, from the furniture to the people. And then there was my sister, Sabine. 2 years younger, with my father's cheekbones and my mother's intolerance, she was the darling of the social circuit. And me? I was the odd one. Quieter, darker-haired, with olive-toned skin that never quite matched the French blue palette my mother favored in our family portraits. I was told often that I resembled our old maid, Magdalena, who had left when I was about 10. It wasn't until I was 17 that I first heard the whispers. "She's not really a Delacroix. She's Magdalena's girl." At the time, I brushed it off. High society drama, I thought. Gossip meant to sting, like most things that lived beneath Southern politeness. My father never treated me differently. If anything, we were close: private lunches at Puggin's porch, long walks along Waterfront Park, shared books, and long discussions about law, philosophy, and history. I lived for our conversations. When he died suddenly from a heart attack at 68, I felt my world collapse. The funeral was held at St. Philip's Church, with its old graveyard and shadowed nave echoing hymns sung 1,000 times. The Delacroix name drew a crowd: judges, senators, former clients. I stood beside the casket, face blank, the smell of lilies choking me. Colette wept softly. Sabine looked bored. And then, I heard it. Not quite a whisper, and just loud enough to carry through the stillness. "She's just the maid's daughter. Not real family." I froze. My mother's voice. Clear as crystal. And then Sabine's chuckle, cruel and condescending. "I don't know why she's even up here." I turned, but they didn't flinch. Sabine locked eyes with me for a moment, then looked away like I was the help. No one intervened. Everyone pretended not to hear. That was Charleston. Polite ignorance was a social currency. 3 days later, I was summoned to the study. Colette sat behind the mahogany desk like a queen in court. "You'll need to leave by sunset," she said, adjusting her pearl necklace. "Excuse me? This is not your home. You have no claim to the estate." Augustine was kind. "But it's time to move on." "No claim?" She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, no will. No papers. Just a notarized letter stating that Augustine had provided for me during his life and owed no further obligation. Her expression remained cold, unreadable. I looked at Sabine, who stood by the door with a triumphant smirk. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My knees trembled. My voice cracked. "Daddy would never. He's not your father," Sabine said softly. At 6:45 p.m., I stood at the wrought iron gate of the house I had called home for 27 years, holding a single suitcase. The sun bled orange over the horizon. The driver, Marcus, a quiet man who had driven for my father for nearly a decade, approached silently. He handed me a single envelope with my name on it, in my father's handwriting. I opened it, and the world shifted. "My dearest Mire, if you are reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong. I feared this moment might come. I raised you as my daughter because that is what you are in every way that matters. The truth is, you are the daughter of Magdalena, yes. But you are also my daughter. Magdalena and I were in love before I married Colette. It was an arrangement, a family deal made to secure business ties. Your mother was the great love of my life. She left not because she wanted to, but because Colette found out and threatened to ruin her. I have never stopped loving her, and I have never stopped loving you. Enclosed are the keys to a property in Beaufort, and the number of my attorney, Mason Rourke. You will find the true will in his possession. I tried to protect you from this ugliness, but it seems Colette's cruelty knows no end. Be strong, daughter. Take what is rightfully yours. Augustine. I read the letter over and over, my tears blurring the ink. The driver looked away politely. I'll take you to Beaufort, Marcus said quietly. Your father told me to wait and make sure you were safe. Beaufort, South Carolina, was everything Charleston wasn't: quieter, softer, slower. The property was a modest but charming coastal house with wraparound porches and Spanish moss-draped trees. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and sea salt. It was peaceful. It was mine. I contacted Mason Rourke the next morning. A wiry man in his 70s, he welcomed me like an old friend. Your father was a good man, he said simply. He left you everything. He handed me the real will, signed, notarized, and airtight. Augustine had divided his assets fairly between the three of us, but he had left the Charleston home and his law firm shares to me. Not Colette. Not Sabine. They had forged a fake document. Mason moved swiftly. Within 2 weeks, probate court had accepted the legitimate will. A quiet legal earthquake followed. By the time Sabine and Colette realized what was happening, the house had already been placed under my name. Colette tried to contest it. She failed. Sabine sent me one seething email, calling me a bastard with a thief's heart. I never replied. I went back once, to the house, accompanied by a sheriff's officer and Marcus. I walked the halls alone. My father's scent lingered faintly in the study. I didn't throw them out immediately. I gave them 1 week to vacate. The day they left, Sabine glared at me from the front steps. You'll never be one of us. I smiled. Good. I'd rather be my mother's daughter than yours. It took time, but I rebuilt. I took over part of my father's practice, eventually passing the bar and becoming an attorney myself. Marcus stayed on as my driver, later becoming something more like family. I found Magdalena 5 years later, living in Baton Rouge. When she saw me, she cried for a full 10 minutes. I hadn't known she had waited this whole time, hoping I'd find her. Colette passed last year in a modest retirement home in Savannah. Sabine never contacted me again. I still live in the Beaufort house. I go walking every morning along the marshes, the sun breaking like stained glass over the water. I often think of that funeral day, of standing there, humiliated and betrayed. And then I remember the letter. The truth. My father's love. And I smile. Because sometimes, the people who try to erase you end up handing you the pen. So what, she's just going to stand up there like she's one of us. My mother's voice was loud enough for half the church to hear. My sister laughed behind her hand. She doesn't even belong here. She's the maid's daughter. Not real family. They didn't whisper. Not really. It was one of those carefully measured tones Southern women use when they want to hurt someone while still sounding refined. The kind of poison dipped in sugar. I stood 2 feet away. My father's casket was in front of me. My hands trembled. No one said a word. They heard it, but no one said a word. And that was the moment something inside me cracked open. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house with white pillars and wraparound porches, where cicadas hummed in the summer heat and secrets were woven into the fabric of every hand-sewn curtain. My name is Mary Delacroix. I'm 32 now, but at the time of this story, I was 27 and had just buried the only person who ever made me feel like I truly belonged, my father, Augustine Delacroix. He was a pillar of Charleston's legal world. Well-respected, stern but gentle. Loved his community, served on too many boards to count, and never missed a Sunday at church. To me, he was just Dad. He taught me how to fish in the low-country marshes, how to sail, how to argue a point like a lawyer, and how to hold my head high. I wasn't blind to the fact that I didn't look exactly like the rest of my family. My hair was darker, my skin a touch warmer. My features softer, not sharp like my mother Colette or my younger sister Sabine. I used to hear whispers growing up, but I'd always brush them off as the talk of jealous neighbors or nosy house staff. My mother never hugged me. Never told me she loved me. Everything with her was clinical, cold smiles, formal dinners, and dresses that didn't quite fit right. Sabine was my polar opposite, fair, blonde, petite, always dressed like she was on her way to a cotillion. She was adored. I was tolerated. But I had my father. He made space for me where my mother and sister tried to edge me out. He'd take me out for long walks by the harbor, take me to bookstores and quiet cafes when my mother and sister left for their spa weekends or debutante parties. He made me feel like I mattered. Then, he died. A heart attack. Sudden. In his sleep. The funeral was a production. Of course it was. Hundreds showed up. The pews were full of lawyers, judges, business partners, and old Charleston families. Everyone shook my hand and said, "He was so proud of you." And I believed them. Until I heard those words behind me. "She's just the maid's daughter." It wasn't just what they said. It was how they said it. Like I was a burden they had tolerated. A lie they were glad to finally be rid of. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. Not at that moment. My grief was raw. I felt like I was spinning inside my own body, watching everything unravel. 3 days later, Colette called me into the study. The room where my father used to sit and read for hours, with his old globe, antique books, and dark oak walls. Now, it felt like a courtroom, and I was on trial. "You'll need to make arrangements to leave," she said, her voice cool. "What?" "This house is not your home anymore." She handed me a thick envelope. It was formal. Legal-looking. A letter, and signed, stating that I had been taken care of during my father's lifetime and had no claim to the estate. There was no will attached. No mention of my name. I turned to Sabine, who was seated comfortably in the corner with a glass of iced tea. She didn't even pretend to look sorry. I asked where my father's real will was. Colette just smiled and said, "There is no need to drag this out. This was always the plan." I left the room in a fog, clutching the envelope like it might turn into something else if I stared at it long enough. That night, I cried in my childhood bedroom. I still had some of my things, photo albums, old clothes, a few books. The rest had already been sorted without my consent. The following morning, Marcus, the family driver, gently knocked on my door. "Mrs. Delacroix asked that you leave by tonight." That was it. No discussion. No negotiation. I stood at the front gate as the sun dipped below the Spanish moss-draped oaks. I had a single suitcase with me. My entire life reduced to a few folded dresses and keepsakes. And then, Marcus handed me a letter. He didn't say anything, just placed it in my hands like it was made of glass. It was addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. What I read inside changed everything. It took me a few minutes before I could actually read it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Even before I saw the contents, I knew it wasn't just a goodbye letter. There was too much weight in Marcus's eyes when he handed it to me. Too much hesitation. As though he understood that whatever was inside would split open a truth I hadn't been ready to face. It was several pages long. His handwriting was neat, deliberate, just like he'd always been. "My dearest Mireille, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you, and for that, I am sorry beyond words. I never wanted to leave you without protection, without clarity. I had hoped I would have more time to prepare things properly, to sit you down and explain everything. But now the time has come, and you must learn the truth without me by your side. You are my daughter. In every way that matters. And also in blood. You were born of love, not duty. Your mother, Magdalena, was the truest heart I ever knew. She worked in our home before I married Colette. We fell in love slowly, then all at once. When she became pregnant with you, I wanted to marry her. But my father, your grandfather, intervened. He threatened to disown me, tear the family name apart, pull the firm from under me. So I married Colette. It was an arrangement. Cold. Calculated. Magdalena left shortly after you were born. Colette found out. She gave her no choice. But I fought to keep you near. I raised you in our home. I made sure you had everything you needed. And more than that, I tried to give you love. I tried to show you that you were wanted. I am so sorry for the pain this letter will bring you. But please understand, it is the only way to protect what is rightfully yours. Attached, you'll find a key. It belongs to the house in Beaufort, the one I purchased in Magdalena's name years ago. You'll also find the name of my personal attorney, Mason Rourke. He has the real will. The one I signed. The one Colette doesn't know about. You are my heir, Mireille. Not because of obligation, but because of love. I trust you'll know what to do with the truth. Your father, always, Augustine. I don't know how long I stood there, under the hanging moss and amber twilight, staring at those words. Part of me expected a camera crew to jump out. Some kind of twisted joke. But it was real. All of it. I finally looked at Marcus. He was quiet, patient. Did you know? I asked. He nodded once. He told me to look after you. We drove to Beaufort that night. I didn't want to sleep under that roof again. Not after what they did. I didn't even say goodbye. The drive took about 2 hours, winding down scenic Highway 17, through marshes and sleepy towns with shuttered shops and gas stations that still used handwritten signs. I watched the darkness outside the window, trying to reconcile two versions of my life, before the letter, and after. The Beaufort house was small by comparison to the Charleston estate, but it was beautiful. Set just outside town, nestled under ancient oaks, with peeling white shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. The lights had already been turned on. Marcus must have called ahead to someone. Inside, it smelled like cedar and salt and faintly of lemon oil. The kind of smell that tells you the house had been cared for, loved. There were pictures on the walls, some of me as a baby, others of a woman I immediately recognized from the few childhood memories I had of her. Magdalena. My mother. For the first time in days, I cried like a child. The next morning, I contacted Mason Rourke. His name had been scribbled at the end of my father's letter, along with a phone number and address. He answered after the second ring. I was expecting your call, he said simply. Come by when you're ready. Your father left everything in order. His office was in downtown Charleston, tucked between a bookstore and a seafood place off Meeting Street. A narrow, 2-story brick building with his name in gold lettering on the door. He was older than I expected, with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet, steady demeanor. When I walked in, he stood up slowly and extended his hand. Mireille, he said, looking at me like someone seeing a long-lost friend. You look just like your mother. That broke me a little. He offered tissues without a word. We sat. He explained everything. The will my mother and Sabine had shown me was fake. Completely forged. A decoy meant to push me out before I could dig any deeper. The real will, signed, witnessed, and notarized, was dated only 6 months before my father's death. In it, he left the Charleston estate to me. The Beaufort house. His controlling shares in the Delacroix Law Group. He had even set up a trust in Magdalena's name, still active though untouched. Colette and Sabine received smaller shares, modest by our family's standards, but nothing like what they expected. Mason had been told to wait. To give them just enough rope to hang themselves. And they had. I don't know what I felt walking out of that office. Vindicated? Angry? Broken? All of it. but mostly, I felt the weight of choice. I had power now. Legal, financial, emotional, too. They had spent years trying to deny my place in the family, and now, they were standing on a trapdoor they helped build. What came next wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming everything they tried to erase. I didn't return to the Charleston house right away. I needed time to sit with the truth, to figure out how to move forward without letting bitterness control me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could articulate, not just because of what they did after my father died, but because of what they'd done my entire life, every small slight, every cold shoulder, every moment they made me feel like I didn't belong. But now I had legal ownership of the house, and more than that, I had the story, the receipts, the truth. They had no idea that everything they tried to keep from me was already in motion to be taken back. Mason advised discretion, at least initially. "Let the documents speak before you do," he said. So we sent the notice. Official. Clean. Legal. It gave Colette and Sabine 10 business days to vacate the Charleston home, per the execution of the legitimate will. The call came the same day they received it. "You scheming little parasite," Colette hissed into the phone. I didn't flinch. "I'd suggest you speak to your lawyer, Colette. You will regret this. You have no idea what you're doing." "No," I said calmly. "I think I finally do." I hung up. I don't believe in yelling matches. That's not the Delacroix way. We fight with facts, with paper, with patience. So I waited. 10 days later, I arrived at the house, not alone, but with Mason and a uniformed sheriff's deputy, just in case. The front gate was open, the driveway silent. No cars. No movement. I stepped inside and found the house eerily clean. Empty, almost. A few decorative pieces remained, but it was obvious they had moved out in a hurry. There was a note left on the foyer table, scribbled on a torn page of a monogrammed notepad: "Enjoy your victory. This place was never really yours." Sabine, I smiled. It was mine now. All of it. I spent the next few weeks sorting through what had been left behind. Photos. Records. Letters. I didn't expect to find anything meaningful, but tucked inside an old box in the attic, I found something that made me stop cold. A bundle of old photographs, me, as a toddler, sitting in Magdalena's lap. Her arms wrapped around me, her smile unmistakable. There were more: my father, Magdalena, me, and between them. A real family. Hidden all these years. I had them framed. Not out of spite, but because I wanted to see them every day. A reminder that truth survives. That love, however complicated, can be stronger than lies. With control of the Delacroix Law Group, I had decisions to make. Colette and Sabine didn't work there, but their influence had lingered, mostly through back channels and old connections. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't need to. Instead, I quietly restructured leadership, moved the firm toward pro bono family law work, especially for low-income women and single mothers. I started a scholarship in Magdalena's name for aspiring female law students from underserved communities in the South. Word traveled. Some people called it bold. Others called it vengeance. I called it setting things right. Colette moved to Savannah, into a much smaller home paid for by the portion of the estate she did receive. Her name stopped appearing at local fundraisers. Sabine tried to stay relevant, hosting events and dressing the part, but without the Delacroix legacy behind her, the invitations slowed. Charleston society has a short memory for those who lose status. Eventually, the whispers caught up to them, the truth trickled out, not from me, but from people who knew. People who worked in our home. Who had heard things. Who had seen the quiet injustices for years. I didn't spread rumors. I didn't need to. Silence can be the loudest form of justice. About a year after the funeral, I took a trip to Baton Rouge. Mason had given me a last known address for Magdalena. He wasn't sure she was still there. I knocked on a small door in a quiet neighborhood. A woman answered, older now, but the eyes were the same. She stared at me for a long time before she said a word. Mireille? I nodded. She pulled me into her arms and held me like I was a lost child, sobbing into my shoulder. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never wanted to leave you. I know, I said. He told me everything. We talked for hours. She had lived a quiet life. Modest. Alone, mostly. She had followed me from afar, afraid to reach out, convinced she'd only bring more pain. But now, we had time. She came to stay with me for a few weeks that spring, and I showed her the house in Beaufort. The photos. The legacy we were reclaiming together. She sat on the porch swing and said it felt like something had come full circle. And it had. I still live in the Charleston house. I've restored it with care, not to what it was, but to what it was meant to be. Honest. Open. Warm. I host dinners for women starting over, for law students finding their voices. I sit on the same porch where I once felt like an outsider, and now I call it mine. People ask if I ever hear from Colette or Sabine. I don't. And I don't need to. Because revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet satisfaction of taking back your name. Of holding your ground with grace. Of living well, so much better than they ever expected.